If you have ever seen a room filled with endless mirrors, glowing lights, pumpkins covered in polka dots, or artwork that seems to stretch into infinity, there's a good chance you've encountered the extraordinary world of Yayoi Kusama. But behind those colorful dots and spectacular installations was a woman whose life was filled with struggle, isolation, obsession, ambition, and an almost unbelievable commitment to art. And now, the art world is mourning one of its most recognizable figures. Yayoi Kusama died at the age of 97 after spending more than 7 decades transforming her personal experiences into some of the most famous contemporary artworks in the world. Her museum announced that she died at a hospital in Tokyo on August 14, 2026. Importantly, her official announcement did not disclose a cause of death. So if you see reports claiming a specific illness or medical condition caused her death, those claims should be treated cautiously unless an authoritative source confirms them. And if you enjoy stories about legendary artists and celebrities, make sure you subscribe, because there is much more to Kusama's story than the famous polka dots. Yayoi Kusama was born on March 22, 1929, in Matsumoto, Japan. From childhood, she experienced vivid visual and auditory hallucinations. She described seeing patterns, dots, and other forms that appear to cover her surroundings. Instead of allowing those experiences to completely define her life, Kusama turned them into art. That decision became the foundation of her entire career. She began creating art as a child and eventually developed the repetitive dots and net patterns that would become her signature. Her official biography explains that her childhood visions directly influenced her earliest artistic expression. In 1957, Kusama moved to the United States, eventually settling in New York. This was an enormous gamble. She entered an American art scene dominated largely by men, and quickly began producing paintings, sculptures, and installations that looked completely different from what many people around her were doing. One of her most important early ideas was the Infinity Net series. The paintings consisted of thousands of repeated marks that could appear almost endless. And this is where I think Kusama's genius becomes clear. She wasn't simply painting dots because they looked attractive. She was using repetition to create the feeling of infinity. Her work eventually moved beyond the canvas. She began covering furniture and objects with stuffed forms in what became known as her accumulation sculptures. The Museum of Modern Art describes Accumulation Number 1, created in 1962, as an important early sculpture in this direction. Then came the works that would eventually make Kusama a global phenomenon. In 1965, she created Infinity Mirror Room, Foul Eyes Field. Imagine walking into a room surrounded by mirrors, with hundreds of repeated objects appearing continue endlessly into the distance. That was revolutionary. The National Gallery of Australia describes the work as a milestone because Kusama used mirrors to transform repetition into an illusion of infinite space. And decades later, these infinity mirror rooms will become some of the most photographed contemporary artworks on Earth. Another famous work is Narcissus Garden, which Kusama presented at the 1966 Venice Biennale. The installation consisted of hundreds of mirrored spheres reflecting the people around them. Kusama even sold the spheres to visitors, turning the artwork into a provocative commentary on narcissism, art, and commerce. Then there are her famous pumpkins. Yellow pumpkins covered in black, dots became one of the most recognizable symbols associated with Kusama. The pumpkin motif wasn't random. It was connected to her childhood experiences and remained an important part of her artistic vocabulary for decades. Her immersive installation, The Spirits of the Pumpkins Descended into the Heavens, is another example of how she combined pumpkins, dots, mirrors, and infinity to create an experience rather than simply an object. And then there is the Obliteration Room, another fascinating idea. A room begins as a relatively ordinary white space. Visitors are given colorful stickers and encouraged to place them throughout the room. Eventually, the white room becomes covered with thousands of dots. The idea connects directly to Kusama's concept of self-obliteration, the disappearance of the individual into an overwhelming field of repeated patterns. That concept is extremely important when understanding Kusama. Her art was not simply about decoration. It was about repetition, infinity, identity, obsession, and the relationship between the individual and the universe. The Yayoi Kusama Museum explains that self-obliteration grew from her obsessive repetition and proliferation of motifs. Now, what about her personal life? This is where there's a lot of misinformation online. Yayoi Kusama was never married and did not have children. She did, however, have a very significant relationship with American artist Joseph Cornell. Their relationship was intensely close and emotionally important to Kusama, but it was not a conventional marriage. They remained close until Cornell's death in 1972. So when you see websites claiming that Kusama had a husband or children, be extremely careful. The available authoritative biographies do not support those claims. Her personal struggles also became an important part of her story. After a return to Japan in the 1970s, Kusama voluntarily entered a psychiatric hospital in Tokyo in 1977. She continued creating art and worked from a nearby studio. What I find most remarkable is that she did not allow her struggles to end her creativity. Instead, art became one of the central ways she continued to live and work. Her official biography records an extraordinary career spanning painting, sculpture, installations, performance, literature, and poetry. She even created hundreds of paintings for her My Eternal Soul series between 2009 and 2021, and continued working on new projects afterward. Her achievements are enormous. She received the Premium Imperiale, one of the major international honors in the arts. She received Japan's Order of Culture, one of the country's highest cultural distinctions. And the Yayoi Kusama Museum opened in Tokyo in 2017, creating a permanent institution dedicated to her work. But in my opinion, her biggest achievement wasn't a single award. It was becoming unmistakable. You can see one Kusama pumpkin, one infinity mirror room, or one of her polka dot installations, and immediately know who created it. That level of artistic identity is incredibly rare. And financially, Kusama became one of the most successful contemporary artists in the world. Her paintings have sold for millions of dollars. Her 1959 Untitled nets reached approximately $10.5 million at Phillips in 2022, setting her auction record. Her works have generated more than $1 billion in cumulative auction sales, according to recent market disclosures. But there is an important distinction between auction sales and personal wealth. There is no independently verified public figure for Yayoi Kusama's personal net worth. Online estimates may claim that she was worth tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars, but those figures are not officially confirmed. Her wealth would have involved artwork sales, gallery arrangements, licensing, collaborations, publications, and other assets. But we should not present an internet estimate as fact, and perhaps that is fitting, because Kusama's greatest legacy was never the money. It was a transformation of personal pain into something millions of people could experience. She took hallucinations and turned them into dots. She took repetition and turned it into infinity. She took pumpkins and transformed them into cultural icons. She took mirrors and turned them into entire universes. And she proved that an artist who once struggled for recognition could eventually become one of the most recognizable names in contemporary art. Yayoi Kusama's death closes one extraordinary chapter in modern art, but her work is designed to feel almost eternal. The mirrors continue reflecting. The dots continue multiplying. The pumpkins continue appearing. And somewhere inside that repetition is the central idea Kusama spent her entire life exploring, the possibility that the individual is only one tiny part of something much larger. That is why, in my opinion, Yayoi Kusama wasn't simply a famous artist. She created a visual language that became impossible to ignore, and that may be her greatest achievement of all.